Welcome to SciTech Culture with Steve Kern and Ben Warner, where we examine science, technology, and culture in the 21st century. Visit our website at scitechculture.com. Hello and welcome to SciTech Culture, the show where we discuss science, technology, and culture in its myriad of forms. My name is Ben Warner, and I'm joined once again by my good friend and colleague Steve Kern. How are we today, Steve?
I'm good, thanks, Ben. Back in the light now, and it's a lovely, sunshiny spring kind of day.
Yeah, absolutely. We can probably talk about the weather this month in the context of our main topic today, which is to do with power outages, and I'm sure we've all experienced them. But the reason why we're focusing on this is that about a week or so ago, South Australia, where we're both from, but Steve is still living in at the moment, had experienced a fairly major outage that was probably a bit of I guess, like we were discussing before we came on, not necessarily too bad, but I guess in context it was probably worse than a normal one, which might only last for an hour or something, because this one went for about 6 hours. And it was due to you couldn't really call it severe weather. Maybe for Adelaide it was severe weather, but in context. But it just kind of highlights this notion of it's really important that like something as critical as power infrastructure that runs like our entire all of our cities and countries and everything, if that goes out without a proper sort of backup plan in place, it could be disastrous, really, because economies can stop on it if it's worse than what it is.
Well, I think you've hit the nail on the head there. And I think in part of this discussion, people try and roll the whole thing into one argument and confuse it all. On one level, absolutely agree. Energy security is a must. You can't have an economy stopping because the lights go out. And that's what happened in South Australia.
Yeah.
But the place had zero emissions for 6 hours. It was daylight, it was done. That was, And
so the smog cloud cleared for those 6 hours, did it?
Yeah, and in a funny sort of serious kind of like description, can you imagine? I couldn't purchase. I was actually in the doctor's. I was in the middle of a consult when the lights went out. Mm-hmm. The doctor kind of gave up, cancelled the consult. I went out. They couldn't book me out because all the computers were out. The doctor recommended I go and get some medicine, just some over-the-counter stuff. I went to the pharmacy to pick it up, and they couldn't serve me unless I had cash. The tills were out, the lights were out. It was like, it was like there were traffic jams because all the road lights went out, trains stopped where they were, electric trains stopped where they were, trams stopped where they were. Like, you're talking everything stopped.
Yeah.
And if you were sitting at home and you have, an electric stove and a microwave and electric kettle, you weren't really having anything for dinner at home. And if you went to a takeaway where they were based on electricity, or if you could find it because the lights weren't on the takeaway and the takeaway couldn't have taken an electronic payment. I mean, this is what we're talking about. It was pretty intense. But the reality is, did we survive? Yeah, of course. It's no big deal at all.
Oh.
Unless you were trying to pay for something.
You were
going in the dark.
Do you want to just describe that little story you were telling me about going to the pub afterwards? Because I think everyone would probably find that amusing.
Well, this is the thing. I've heard a lot spoken about what happened in South Australia, but no one's actually talked about the human aspect. So as it turns out, and I don't know, but it appears that pubs with pokies all had backup generators because the pokies aren't allowed to go down.
What critical piece of infrastructure that they are.
Like we're talking about energy security, the places that legislated with pokies that they had to have energy security did. But the funny thing was these pubs only had enough power to run the pokies and the lights, but not their fridges, not the beer taps. Beer was served out of the fridges. So it was already bottled beer or canned drinks or wine that could be served without any sort of machinery or electronic thing. There was no EFTPOS, so it was cash-only bars. So you'd see people in the bars say, I want to have this. and they'd say, have you got cash? Because we can't process any electronic payments. And the place was full. Because, of course, they got gas and they're cooking, and all these people with electric stoves and cold houses, the pub was packed. It was full of people drinking warm beer and paying for everything in cash. So we got by. Everyone survived. But it was, on the one hand, it was a great inconvenience. On the other hand, it was a great novelty.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's amazing what happens when it gets taken away, and you just take it for granted that this thing's all on all the time. And then when you can't do something, it just really can make things inconvenient.
Well, I've heard countless heartwarming stories of how families sat together in candlelight, played board games, or if they went down to the pub like I did, they were having a blast there. I didn't see anyone miserable with the power out, except maybe the people that needed to use EFTPOS or PayWay. But apart from that, everyone was fine. Then at the level below that, you can then look at the policy.
I was just about to get onto that. There was a lot of aftermath, obviously. Everyone's looking for someone to blame afterwards. There was a lot in the news and the media about it afterwards.
Just blame South Australia.
Yeah, that's right. This idea of a backup, I guess, is what the issue was. That in effect, the weather event basically exposed an issue just in the way it all kind of played out. It kind of knocked out enough to bring the whole thing down when it probably shouldn't have happened in the first place like that. If say some different policies had been put in place to encourage different things, like we were discussing before we got on.
Well, that's right. Now, I don't want to buy into the politics because I don't know really anything about it. But what we do know is that in the mid-1990s, the federal government created the national grid. And that was effectively so states, by and large, could privatise their electricity utilities. And the whole idea is that you're all connected. Therefore, a company anywhere can sell you electrons from another state and all that sort of thing. Now, I don't really know the ins and outs. South Australia, I think through policy, has chosen to say, well, we want to push renewables because we think that's important. I don't know what right South Australia has to expect that they should be provided electricity from somewhere else through the national grid. That's a question for others. I think the fact is that if you've got a national grid, perhaps there should be some expectation that you can get those electrons whenever you need them for your part of the grid.
I guess even if it's at cost.
Well, that's right. I think really what we're seeing, to be quite honest, is that the national grid idea is a mid-1990s idea. We're 20 years down the track and the concept has failed. So let's just go with that. No finger pointing. There's going to be plenty of that from other people and by other people. But I think the concept of the national grid, probably once it was enacted, there wasn't any more money invested in it, and the grid is just what we got. And there's probably a weakness in state federal regulation and cooperation between the states. That's nothing new. The interesting thing is that I think for South Australia, it frames that tipping point of an economy between renewable, tech-based energy generation and the old world fossil fuel, hardwired grid. And I would like to ask a question that, if anyone can answer, is what if 60% of South Australia had battery storage and, solar PV or something like that? There wouldn't have been a blackout, is my tip, or the blackout would have been a lot shorter.
Well, that's like you were saying before we got on, that when you've got things like solar and wind power, that's fine when the sun's shining and the wind's blowing. But if you don't have that stored backup, which, as you're saying, a battery system can provide, you are going to get stuck. Unless you go a different direction and build nuclear power plants or something and do something like that.
Well, it's all about that base load, really. And I think, without really understanding the technical side of this, I think what they'll find is that there were frequency fluctuations in the line, and that was caused, by surging of your renewables in and out of the grid at the same time that the interconnector was cut off and something else happened and some towers fell over. Of course, it was a whole combination of things, and it was weather, at the root of it. But if we've got the Internet of Things, if we embrace the disruption and the power that all this technology is bringing us, and if people would have batteries, if this was 10 years down the track, you would expect all those batteries in all those homes would have come online, I suspect, and provided enough power to keep the grid up.
Yeah. At
the very least, even if the grid went down, those 60% of houses would have been self-sufficient with power at least throughout the night. So in the worst case scenario, if your neighbour or your friend had a battery, you go around to their place and just, hang out. So, but the whole world wouldn't be without power. Shopping centres, with their big roofs, could have big battery storage. They could have kept on going. So, we can point fingers at where we are today. We can say maybe we want to go back to the 1950s, which I don't think is really possible.
Not anymore,
unless
no.
Going back to the future. Or you can say, well, how could we have fixed this with technology? What sort of policies could we introduce to, just speed up the process away? Maybe we don't need that baseload generation in the way that we used to have it. And there are things we can do.
Yeah, absolutely.
I want someone to answer that for me. Is that the right sort of thinking, or do we need, nuclear power plants and fossil fuel? I don't know.
Yeah, and which I'm sure will cause all manner of debate if it was actually brought up in political terms.
Yeah,
all right. We might leave it there, Steve. Hopefully, we'll see some progress on that. It'll be slow, I'm guessing, but hopefully at some point something will be put in place.
Well, in the meantime, let's just hope they keep the lights on.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. We're going to be off for about a month or so because I'm off to Japan and China again, so I'm hoping to broadcast maybe some more videos out of Japan, hopefully for everyone. Unfortunately, I can't do it from China until I come back because of the blockages on Facebook, YouTube, and all the other major websites, social media websites in China. But hopefully, I'll be able to, get this iPhone 7 4K camera give it a bit of a spin, and hopefully we'll come up with some good videos. And so I'd say we'll be aiming to come back by about mid-November at this point. So should all be good. Looking forward to the trip and also coming back and getting into it.
Excellent. Well, you have a lot of fun and send us those photos when you can. We love the bullet trains. We love the trips on the subways and the food, of course, and all the other things that you always send back. They're excellent. They certainly brighten up our feeds.
Absolutely, will do. All right, so don't forget our website, scitechculture.com. You can get all of our links and content there. You can interact with us on Twitter, Google+, and Facebook, so I'd love to hear from you. And if you have anyone that's interested in the types of topics Steve and I cover on a regular basis, feel free to send them to our website. We'd greatly appreciate that. All right, so that's it for this episode. We'll catch you next time.